feel like Gordon Bombay would have taken his career to even further heights.
Everything's flashy, everything's cocaine, everything's fun.
Open wide for some soccer!
I don't care what you think about what your personal thoughts are at home. I care that you hate the Cowboys.
Call this college rule! Welcome back to the Sports Experience Podcast. It's Dom and Chris here. And before we get into the episode, as always, make sure you check us out on our social medias, which are posted at the very beginning of each episode. And we are recording down here in Engle Studio, which is here in Tucson for all your audio needs. And Chris, are you ready to open wide for some soccer?
That's right, man. We're right back into it. Going with Pele today.
The legend.
The legend. Some call him the king. I would have to agree with that.
The Black Pearl, Johnny Depp style.
He's for me, he's the best ever to play it, but it's probably because he was like so, revolutionary with his style and all of that shit. So yeah, let's get into it, man.
Yeah, Pele was born October 23rd, 1940. His name is Edson Arantes do Nascimento.
Yeah, he was actually named after Thomas Edison, but they dropped the I. But it was still on his birth certificate because they were so confused, but they just didn't care. But they just called him Edson. And then in grade school, they said that the nickname Pelé came around, and they really don't know where it came from.
Yeah, I had read his family nicknamed him Dico when he was a kid. Pele came, I guess, the way he pronounced a Vasco da Gama goalie named Pele, but he didn't pronounce it right.
Yeah, that's what they said. But they also said they were like, maybe.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It was just one of those where you're just like, yeah.
Lost to it, but legendary.
But that was it was one of his favorite players, which was a goalkeeper at that time. And that gets us right into his father, who was a professional player who actually had a bad injury.
His dad, Dondinho, was a player for Fluminense. What kind of injury did he have?
I didn't see it. The only thing I saw that he had a bad injury that prevented him from working like labor jobs, which then put them in poverty. So his career ended. And that's why his mom was so anti-Pele playing, even though it was obvious he was so much better than so many people.
No.
That she was just like, dude, we're in poverty right now because your dad got injured or whatever, you know what I mean? Because there's not a lot of stuff with that. It quickly became obvious that he was going to pave the way, though.
I mean, growing up in Minas Gerais, with no money, that sucks.
They said that he used to play with a sock with a bunch of like tissues or whatever, newspaper packed into it, or a grapefruit was a big one. I always thought that was pretty cool because it's smaller, and we get into in a little bit because he was on youth teams. He's on youth teams and stuff, and he wins a couple of youth trophies. But then he ends up being in this first wave of futsal, which is indoor soccer, which has a smaller ball, which is like 5-on-5 or 6-on-6. And he was talking about how important that was for building his skill on the ball. And because he was 13, 14 when he was playing this, and he was playing against full grown-ass adults.
He's like a grown-ass men that he's playing against is like a tween, essentially. And I remember in our Zico episode, we talked about how beneficial he thought futsal was as well.
They said
Pele's on the ground floor of this. It's like being invented as he's coming up, which is pretty cool.
They said it was the first wave of it coming to Sao Paulo, and he was in that like first group, and that's why it was like 14-year-olds against 22-year-olds. Stuff like that, where it was almost him against professionals, and a lot of people could see they were just like, oh, this guy, I mean, is serious. He had a scout take him to Santos, I think, when he was 15. And then we see, because literally he has one training session with Santos.
Yeah.
He's 15, and then they do everything they can to sign him to a professional contract.
Yeah, and they try him out, and his coach at Bauru, his youth team, Valdemar de Brito, said he would be the greatest player in the world. That's like, a scout for the Phillies going out there looking at Schmitty at the ball field at 10.
Whew. Well, it's crazy to say that, though. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. Because he then becomes the greatest. But at 15, I think you could really see it because, I mean, even at Santos, which was a big club, took him under their wing, even though it takes a little bit longer. He signs this contract over the next couple of months.
Yeah, and he makes a senior team debut when he's still 15. He's just about to turn 16. I can't even imagine the older players on the team. Who is this? Do we need to buy him beer?
I actually saw something that I had never seen because obviously I know various things about him, but I saw this that I never saw when he was 15 coming into this. The press actually in Sao Paulo were touting him as the big superstar coming out of our region. Look out for this kid, and that was never seen before, especially from a kid. You know what I mean? Somebody that was 15.
Freddie Adu treatment.
This is the first time we see this, and then. Do you want to just jump right into 58 World Cup? Because
let's do that.
He plays a little bit in 57 for Santos, but he's not the consistent starter you see.
Yeah.
And then he gets picked at age 16 for the 58 World Cup. And outside of Sao Paulo and the joining areas or whatever that would get their news, everybody was just like, who? Who? It was because news didn't travel that way. So they were like, whoa.
There's no internet.
This 16-year-old's it was such a shakeup of this Brazilian team. I got to go back to this story. I know I told it in our 70 World Cup episode, but this is probably my favorite story. He said his dad told him that men don't cry. And then when he was 9 years old, he watched Uruguay beat Brazil in Brazil to win the 1950 World Cup. And he told him then, he said, Dad, because then his dad cried like a bitch.
Oh, yeah.
And he said, Dad, I'm going to win you the World Cup. He said it, he was just kind of jokingly, but also being I'm going to do this. And then he comes back 8 years later and we get into 58.
That Uruguay game for Brazil in terms of sports, that's their version of the end of My Girl.
Oh, my God. It was It was a horror story.
Yeah, Barbosa, or whatever the goalie.
Yep.
So 58 in Sweden.
In Sweden, which you just wouldn't see Sweden host. This is the shit that I love with this stuff. Where you're just all right, let's do Sweden. And then Sweden has a good World Cup. He doesn't play in the first two matches. This is
knee injury. Yeah.
Well, this is another thing that you don't see anymore. They probably wouldn't have brought him. Being a 16-year-old and being injured, but whoever saw him in this Brazilian team was just no, he has to be with us.
Yeah, no, his teammates really stuck up for him. They're he can play. We just got to win until he can play.
First game, third game of the group stage, he plays the USSR. I feel like you were about to rock the USSR out of this fucking world.
Oh, yeah.
And we see his skill come to right away. I mean, it's...
He gets an assist on a Vavá goal.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. He was the youngest to ever participate in a World Cup, which I found pretty interesting.
I'll tell you what, we're going to say
there's a lot of firsts. Yep.
We're going to say a lot of things, and then when people break records, this is probably one of my favorite things. They're just oh yeah, that was Pelé's record.
Yeah.
So, next game we get against France.
Mm-hmm.
What does he do?
Hat trick.
First youngest player to have a hat trick. It's crazy to me that he comes on the scene so just like a lightning bolt for this World Cup.
Yeah.
But they were saying even back then he was better than everybody on the pitch.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
At 16.
Youngest to play in a World Cup final, 17 years, 249 days. And what does he do in the final, Chris?
Well, we're in the final versus Sweden in Stockholm.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's a bunch of whites.
Pele is not like the other ones.
And I'm going to get into that right after this because it's such a shock kind of to these whites.
It's important.
He has 2 goals, one of which is voted and still voted one of the best goals of all time. And I bring it up because he flicks it over the Swedish defender and volleys it. And in this era in Europe, the thing that was going around on the newspaper was Pelé did something we've never seen before.
What is this sorcery?
It was very much like that where they almost couldn't believe what they were seeing with he was doing stuff with the ball that they thought was kind of not possible. You know what I mean? It was almost like he had the ball on a little control even though they didn't even know what that meant in 58.
But they end up winning the game. He gets 2 goals, actually, in the game.
2 goals, one of which, man, you got to check it out if you want to check it out.
Yeah, 5-2.
I'll say this, though. He's second for most goals scored. Who's first?
Juste Fontaine. Go listen to that episode.
Just what I wanted you to say.
Yes. See? But yeah, he was like absolutely thrilled when he won the World Cup. I mean, everybody's thrilled, but he was like a kid in a candy store, a literal kid too.
One of these stories that you hear is after they won, he passed out, regained consciousness, and just started crying.
Which
so you is
against his father's wishes, but I think it's okay.
He becomes, and this is the thing about this time period, he becomes the first black global superstar.
Yeah.
Because it's obvious that he was the star of this Brazilian team that comes to Sweden and beats the whites.
He's not a student athlete.
But then makes soccer kind of more accessible in different areas. And we see this over his entire career where he's almost an ambassador for the game.
Oh, yeah.
On top of being this superstar. But this is what I love about this is 58, probably his greatest year. We can talk about 70, but 58, he comes back to Santos.
And wins his first title.
And scores, let me see, because he scores an unbelievable amount of goals.
58.
58 goals in one season. It's still the record for the Brazilian league. And this is where Santos becomes a powerhouse because before they were just like one of the other teams. You know what I mean? They weren't like a bad team, but they weren't like a powerhouse.
It's like when the Bulls got Jordan, essentially.
Yes. He is so much like Jordan outside of playing baseball, which would have been hilarious.
Oh, my God. Watching Pele. What am I supposed to do with this? Can I kick the ball?
Just has the weirdest stance.
He tries to roundhouse the fastball coming in at about 90.
And he does.
Over the fence. But in 1959, they had their first victory in the Torneo Rio Sao Paulo with a victory over Vasco da Gama. And in 1960, they win the Campeonato Paulista again, and he has 33 goals.
Yep.
Which is insane.
61, he has 47. He has scoring titles. I think he ends up winning 11 scoring titles in the Brazilian league, and he has 9 consecutive scoring titles. I'll probably bring that up again because there's talk about this Brazilian league not being as high a standard as the European league, and I would say that's not true, especially in this time because you just didn't have players leaving. This is all of the talent.
They weren't getting bought
like
they are, in future decades. Like they're just staying there.
And that brings us to European clubs coming in to try and buy him because this is like a several year thing leading up to the 62 World Cup, even a little bit after that. But we see Real Madrid come in and was close to buy him.
AC Milan, I think, was in the mix there, too.
I'll tell you what, the closest one, Inter Milan actually had him in a contract.
Oh,
because
man.
they were offering him more money, especially Italian clubs at this time. Watch any of our other soccer episodes. I feel like we just keep bringing that up.
Exactly, right.
But they had all the money backing this at this time, and they offered him a big contract. And what the Brazilian government did was they came in and declared him a national treasure.
Which is awesome.
And literally made it a crime to sell him.
You're going to the gulag.
So Inter Milan has a contract signed that they have to rip up because it became illegal at that point. To put it in perspective, though, why Brazilian government did this, though, was Santos, their fan base, almost rioted when they heard this was happening.
Oh, yeah. And we've seen this in multiple episodes of guys leaving or, threatening not to play. The fans go nuts, which is awesome.
I love the fact because he was kind of always into staying. I believe the Brazilian government stepped in and subsidized his salary because after this, he becomes the highest paid soccer player in the world. You know what I mean? So, it was a bunch of shit where they were just like, he needs to stay. This is crazy. He's our superstar. And then
the president declared him the official national treasure of Brazil.
Yep.
That's better than being president. I'm sorry. And then they're winning all these copas.
Well, I was just going to bring this up. So in 60, they qualify for in 61, I'm sorry, they qualify for the Copa Libertadores, which is like the Champions League in South America.
Yep.
So it's like their big kind of thing or whatever. They go on to win in 62, and that Actually, no. They go on to win in 61, and then they win the International Cup in 62 against Benfica. I wanted to bring this up before we get into the World Cup of 62. Pele has a hat trick, and the Benfica goalkeeper had a quote. Did you see what that?
I saw, but yeah, let him know. It's awesome.
He says, "I arrived hoping to stop a great man, but I went away convinced I had been undone by someone who was not born on the same planet as the rest of us." And it is such a true statement because, like European players, they would barely see up close, and they would be like, nah, all that's kind of like overhype.
He's doing it against its, crappier competition. And then you're like, he's playing a different sport.
He literally showed up and had a hat trick against this Benfica team who was amazing. So we get into the 62 World Cup.
Yes, 62. And by this point, he's the best player in the world. This is he's
the biggest superstar.
What was it? The one we talked about for the Italian soccer coach. Yeah. What was his name? Fathers and Sons.
Maldini's.
Yeah, Maldini.
Yep.
This is that one.
I was stumped. You stumped me for a second because I was like, Italian soccer coach, and it was like Fathers and Sons. I was like, there it is.
But he's the best player in the world, and everybody knows it. And he's also a very marked man in this tournament, I believe.
This is the start of FIFA realizing that they need to step in. So it's it's 62 in Chile, which we'll never see another World Cup in Chile.
No, after that shit show.
Started good versus Mexico.
Yep.
No, bullshit with him. He was really on his game. Had a goal. He assisted and then had a goal. And then the next game against Czechoslovakia.
He's playing countries that aren't countries anymore. This is how in the long ago it was.
They actually played Czechoslovakia more than, I was surprised. You're just like, oh, yeah, they
These
pop
Eastern
up again.
Bloc countries in the 60s seem to be pretty good with that Ivan Drago training regimen, perhaps.
And they just had a different, you look at all the countries that broke up, you were just like, if all those countries came together, they'd be a pretty good team.
Yeah, right?
He ends up injuring himself, and he gets out of the rest of the World Cup. And this is what they were saying is, we don't want our superstars to be out of games. It's just like with football where they're trying to protect the quarterbacks. It's all of that where they're just like, people are tuning in to watch superstars.
Exactly.
So he injures himself, but this Brazilian team is a good team.
Oh, they're stacked.
And they have
Garrincha
come in and pretty much take over the leadership role and lead them to this 62 World Cup victory. So
I saw a guy, Amarildo. I read it as Armadillo.
Yep. Amarildo actually took over his spot. But that Armadillo.
But yeah, they're flying high after 62. I mean, what do you get, 2 in a row? Does that happen often in World Cup?
No, it's very, very rare. Okay. I think that might be one of the only ones.
Oh, shoot.
I'm trying to think of somebody else, but I can't think of anybody else. And that's what they were saying was that there was such a good team. Back to Santos as defending champions in the Copa Libertadores. They qualify into the semifinals.
Yeah, they're like automatically birthed because they won the year before or something.
Which never happens now.
Yeah.
It's almost a little ridiculous because you just kind of like show up and you're fresh and you're whatever.
But that's a lot of buys.
But they end up in the semifinals. They end up facing Botafogo, who we talk about in that other episode, who supplies a ton of players to the international team. Garrincha is on this team.
Nice.
And they end up beating them over 2 legs because all of these back in the day used to be one home, one away. To face Boca Juniors in the finals. They end up beating them in the first game at home and then end up beating them in the second game.
Yeah, they're the only ones from Brazil to ever win on Argentine soil, which is pretty
good
for their soccer rivalry.
First ones to win and the only Brazilian team to ever win in Argentina, which that was pretty big. And like you said, the rivalry is just between them is just so palpable.
Oh, it is. Every time I read Copa, I immediately think of Barry Manilow. Yep. I'm sorry, I just do.
And you should.
Yes, I should.
Mandy.
I'm a fan-alo Sports Experience podcast fans.
Mandy. So this is when Santos themselves starts to become a commodity in which they have international friendlies with teams, and they start kind of doing that. We see that for this Brazilian squad where it's kind of like, oh, they'll go out on their off season. And like I said, he's like an ambassador to all these teams.
He's like Duka Hanamoku, teaching surfing, only teaching soccer.
I like it. So 63, like I said, they won the league again. 64, they don't really do much. So do you want to jump right into 66?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention 65. They lose the playoffs,
yes,
2-1. But Pele has 8 goals in that tournament, which is just like you can beat the rest of the team, just not him.
Well, and this is the thing that people are saying. It was just like if the competition wasn't so high, they would have slaughtered him with Pele playing. You know what I mean? That was the thing that everyone was just like, you guys just
You're beating cupcakes? I think not.
You Europeans.
Oh, Europe and your preconceived notions about things. But 66, the World Cup's in England. It's in England. And this is not a good World Cup for Pele. It's a dangerous World Cup for Pele.
This is where controversy starts. And they, like I said, in 62, they didn't think he was... I mean, he obviously wasn't injured by somebody else, but they were saying, like, oh, we need to keep superstars in this game.
And the other teams had none of that.
Brazil goes up against Bulgaria with an English ref who did not like the style of Brazilian football. That's just the only way I can explain it. Maybe a little racist.
I mean, Chris, it's England in the 60s.
But they were saying the refereeing in this group stage was so bad. And they were like, English is known to have harsh tackles. These were like straight up like rugby tackles.
They're mean.
And Bulgaria, he injures him first game against Bulgaria.
And they're going for a three-peat. This is not fair.
This is true. They're going for a three-peat. There's also jealousy with that. It's in England. They want Brazil. Like, there's very much things that stack up with Brazil kind of getting stuff kind of against them.
This is why England hasn't won a World Cup since then. The Pele curse.
Whoa. They literally just lost 20 minutes before we started this podcast.
Did they really?
Yeah.
No shit. Who?
To France.
Oh, even better.
So if anybody's watching this a couple of weeks from now, like literally I drove here after they lost to France 2-1.
That's not like they've ever had a rivalry or anything.
I don't think they even know each other. Next game, they play Hungary. He has to sit out. They end up losing.
Yep.
This is what we see where... You know, FIFA's or whatever it is at that time, the governing body's like, man, this sucks. We want Pele to come in. He comes in and plays Portugal. They snipe him.
The bigger brother. I'll just kill myself if Portugal doesn't win. But their head coach, Vicente Fiola, he changed the whole defense, including the goalie for this game.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know what his thinking was, but it didn't work, and it added insult to injury when they're kicking the crap out of poor Pele.
And this is before substitutions, so he's limping around the entire game. They switched out the defense because there was talks before the game that the defense was weak. It wasn't a strong defense. There was all this problems. He tried to switch it out to better it. I'll say this in this game, if you see it, even though Brazil kind of goes down to 10 men, is Eusebio runs Brazilian team ragged. So... You've talked about him before being like really good. I'm just saying. So like he is unbelievable in this game. They did take Pele out early on, whatever. I don't know if they would have beaten them in this because he was so good in that game. They ended up losing like 3-0, crash out of the World Cup, and this is the first time that they lose in such a manner.
Yeah, and because of referee George McCabe's unwillingness to, call fouls when they occur, Pele said he'd never play in another World Cup again.
Well, he gets hacked so many times, and literally they weren't even calling fouls. It wasn't even like a thing.
Yeah.
He comes out and he doesn't play for Brazil for the next couple of years.
Yeah.
So it's not like something that he's just kind of like hot-headed about. He's literally like, no, I'm done. This international game isn't for me.
No, which is very unfortunate considering how big of a star and how important he was to the sport of soccer.
He was he was outside because like I feel like other stars were stars in like England, like Bobby Charlton's a star in England, but he's not necessarily a star. You know what I mean? Pelé was a star everywhere.
Yeah, and everywhere that he went. Interestingly enough.
Yep.
Let's see. After the 66 World Cup, he just keeps stacking it up the stats for Santos because they're kind of starting to decline and get older as far as their team's overall success. On November 10th, 1969, he scored his 1,000th goal.
This is one of my favorite quotes from a team because everybody showed up in anticipation of him scoring it. They scored against Vasco da Gama. Mm-hmm. And they said that literally even fans of Vasco were like, just let the ball go in because he had a shot that the goalie blocked and he was just like, no! And like, he scores it on a penalty. It's, a classic 1,000th goal, if you know what I mean.
Oh, yeah.
67, 68, and 69, they still win the Brazilian championships that year.
Okay.
And he's still scoring leaders. And that's what people were saying coming into the 70 World Cup. If you want a more in-depth thing about
we did a whole episode on it.
We did a whole episode. But coming into the 70 World Cup, people are like, how do we not have Pele playing? Government steps in.
Yes, they did, because it's a new government, Chris.
There's a whole thing with that if you want to check it out.
It's brand new.
So leading up to the 70 World Cup, though, people are like, what is happening? It's happening in Mexico. The international governing body, which I think becomes FIFA soon in this era, says, hey, we're instituting yellow and red cards to
prevent what happened last time.
Have more control over the game.
Yeah.
And we see probably the best Brazilian team, definitely, or probably the best international team, probably the best Brazilian team, or definitely, whatever, I mix those two up. But they come into 1970 as...
And as much turmoil as they're facing, they're still stacked. They're just stacked.
Player-wise, they're stacked. They fire the coach right before. They get a new coach who is almost like a player coach. Yep. So it fits into this kind of like system that they're doing. Mexico has their this is the first time they're going to be color TV. Yep. So they, like we were saying, they make it a staple that they wear the gold with the blue shorts.
Yeah. And that's like the pinstripes for the Yankees as far as soccer goes.
And as soon as the color, as soon as they can syndicate it in color, they made that as their only jersey that they were wearing from home. And we discussed it in the other episode. They actually had other jerseys that they would kind of switch in, and they were like, no, we need to be known as this powerhouse.
It's called marketing 101.
Yeah.
But they roll into this tournament, and then they start just rolling people. Rolling other teams. Like I said, you can check out the 1970 episode, but they make it all the way to the finals against the Italians.
Well, hold on. Let's. Okay. I want to get a little bit into it because they beat Czechoslovakia again, and that's why I want to bring it up because they face them again.
There we go.
2-1. Pele scores, gets an assist to Greason. Then they beat England, and this is where I kind of want to bring it up because this was back in '66. They had this rivalry, even though they never met each other.
Yeah,
and they had, but you know what I mean. They didn't meet each other in the last World Cup, but they still were looked at as like this was a great England team. Some thought we're going to go all the way against this Brazilian team that it was still up in the air. Yeah. Like we said, they came in under turmoil. They fired their coach. All this like shit was happening, and then they end up beating them. And that's kind of where everybody said it was just like everybody got behind this Brazilian team. We see him beat Romania, and this is why I really want to bring this up because it comes full circle when they play Uruguay in the semis for the first time since the 1950 loss that his father cried. You know what I mean? Yeah. That he found out his father wasn't a man.
Big girls don't cry, Chris.
And they end up beating him. It's one of those like spider webs that people talk about.
It's just one of those revenge is a dish best served cold.
Yep. And then, like you said, they end up facing Italy, dominating him. He has one of the best assists you'll ever see in a World Cup. Like I said, like we go really in depth into the 1970 World Cup if you want to check that out. This, for me, is probably the best international team ever, one of the best teams to ever play.
Together.
Together. Yeah. It's really one of those things. And then we see Sorry, I'm trying to read.
Oh, no, it's chill. They win 4-1. The Jules Rimet trophy, because they make replicas after that. They get to keep it.
So hold on. Pele scores the Brazil's 100th World Cup goal. This is what I was trying to see in the final, and gets assists 3 and 4 for the winning their third to get the Jules Rimet trophy. Which they said if somebody wins 3 times, they would give them that trophy.
Oh, really?
That was the thing. So they ended up awarding Brazil this trophy. I think it's like 10 years later, thieves steal it and melt it down.
Yeah, I saw that.
There's a whole thing about it where they don't necessarily know that they melted it down, but they said they did. It was like this whole thing where they were just like, all right, well, where's the gold? It's the Jules Rimet. That trophy is so. Just that history is so crazy.
It's iconic, yeah.
And then we see his career kind of. I mean, he's in the twilight of it.
Yeah, and I mean, I did want to bring this up. After the tournament, there an Italian defender, Tarcisio Bergnic, said, "I told myself before the game he's made of skin and bones, just like everyone else, but I was wrong."
Yep. Which I
he was responsible for 53% of their goals in that tournament. That's incredible.
After this is his 4th World Cup. Mm-hmm. Just to put it in perspective, this is like
it's like the younger Maldini.
Yes,
because he's starting so young.
Mm-hmm.
But the following season, his last game.
Well, last international game is against Yugoslavia because
not
he
even
just
a country anymore.
has to play those. July 18th, 71. And then he plays for Santos for the next couple of years, but it's very like spotty and it's almost like a celebrity, you know what I mean? Like Jordan with the Wizards.
Pretty much, yeah. The team is aging around him, but by 1976, he signs with another team in another country.
Well, I got to say this. In 74, he actually retires.
Yeah.
So it's his 18th, 19th season. There's kind of debate over whether he has, because he really wasn't playing. He retires. Everybody's just like, oh, thanks. And then in 75, 76, because it literally took like a year and a half of convincing him to come and play for the New York Cosmos.
Yeah.
And in Brazil, they were furious. They thought it was a money grab. They were like, what are you doing? If you're playing, you should be playing for Santos. You shouldn't have another club underneath your wing. They offered him a ton of money.
They drove the Briggs truck up to my house.
And it was very party and drug fueled. They said that the press conference to announce him was at the 21 Club and was just
this
coke-fueled.
is 1970s New York. I would expect nothing less.
Very coke fueled. And then this is
was Maradona with them?
No, this is This is
There's like a 10-year-old Diego Maradona.
What was that? Was that one club? I don't remember. But one of my favorite things about him, because he signed all these contracts, whatever, and they had an exhibition game, and they didn't have the proper soccer stadiums. They didn't have the proper soccer field. So like literally they had this huge thing and like half of it was dirt.
Yeah.
So they went in and they spray painted the ground green to look like grass and like did all this stuff to look like grass.
Sounds like Cleveland Municipal Stadium.
He didn't speak very well English, so he's after the game, he's in the shower and he's calling in like the manager and he's like, I quit. I'll never play for you again. Blah, 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 blah. And they're like, they don't understand what's wrong because he can't explain what's wrong. And they finally get somebody who speaks Portuguese. And he's just like, something's wrong with your field. You turned my feet green from a fungus. I need these to survive.
Oh, my God.
And then they're like, oh, it's spray paint. And then they go and they wash it off and he just laughs and laughs because he literally thought, like, what's wrong with this American? Like, he doesn't know, you know?
We don't know soccer, but...
But we see him, and this is what I mean as the ambassador.
Exactly, yeah.
Is he brings in and makes it to where other stars come in. I mean...
Couple guys we did episodes on.
Beckenbauer. Cruyff. We have Carlos Alberto who comes in, who we didn't really mention, but I mean, check out the 70 episode.
Yeah.
Bobby Moore comes in, who I have a great quote for him later. But like, you see him like legitimize this just this league that was not at all. And he talks about how bad his team was when he first got there.
Yeah.
I have to bring this up because I actually kind of forgot about it in 69.
Yeah.
Or maybe that was in 79. Hold on. No, in 69, he went to Nigeria
Oh yeah, and also Lebanon in the 70s.
Yep, and they stopped the civil war. This is where I want to go. They actually had a ceasefire that was only supposed to be for 48 hours and ended up being for a year. In a Nigerian civil war, and then in '75 with the Cosmos, he went to Lebanon a week before the Lebanese civil war broke out, and they said it kind of like delayed it for, or what, you know what I mean? Like,
well, they need to watch him before they start killing each other.
He also went to Egypt. He played a team called the Pharaohs, which I absolutely love. They were just an Egyptian team, and just stuff like that, where he literally brought it around the world. He said, when he got to the Cosmos, 75, 76, they're horrible. Yeah. 77, they bring in Beckenbauer. They bring in a new coach. They bring in like kind of other players.
Yeah.
And then in 77, because, I mean, he is old. He's aging. He's targeted.
He's 37 at this point.
They end up winning
the Soccer Bowl,
which still is one of my favorite stupid American things.
Oh, yeah.
They end up beating the Rowdies, the Strikers.
Tampa Bay Rowdy. Does that name not fit Tampa Bay?
The Fort Lauderdale Strikers. Like, yeah, these names are just like, you silly fucks. And then the Seattle Sounders, who are still, came back as a franchise.
Yeah, they're an MLS team.
Yeah.
I saw one, the Dallas Tornado. It's not plural. They're just the Tornado. Lone Rangers? I don't get it.
There's one in a smaller division called the Pennsylvania Stoners. They knew what they were doing.
They knew exactly what they were doing. But yes, they do win 2 soccer bowls with Pele. They were drawing like 60, 70,000 fans, a giant stadium for that, which, I mean, for the 70s in America, for soccer to fill that stadium up, that's pretty damn incredible.
Multiple times, especially in 77, they were doing it. And then you can kind of tell, though, that it was the end of his career. And he actually has his last game, which I thought was so great of the Cosmos and Santos to kind of set this up. October 1st, 77, he plays Cosmos versus Santos in a sold-out giant stadium. Muhammad Ali is there, Bobby
ABC's
Moore.
Wild World of Sports. So this is broadcast to the entire country.
Yep.
And he plays, I thought it was interesting, in the first half he plays for the Cosmos, and then he switches uniforms in the second half and plays for Santos.
I love that. That's the thing that I love, because they were like, no, we get it. He's the king. Let's, put him on our shoulders and parade him around town, because that's the way it is.
It's a nice send-off. It's a send-off he deserved.
Bobby Moore said about Pele was the most complete player I've ever seen. He had everything: 2 good feet, magic in the air, quick, powerful. And that's the thing that everybody kind of looks back on, is they were like, oh, no, he's a modern player back then. And he was doing stuff. And we talk about these guys, Maradona. They were like, no, they could play in any era. They're not like exclusive to like, oh, that was a really good defender in 1972. No, it was like Pele was the quintessential superstar.
One for the ages. Cruyff had a great quote. He said, Pele is the only player who surpassed the boundaries of logic.
Well, they literally said he was more than a soccer player, more than a man, and more than a name. And that was like one of those things you're just like, God, man, yeah, he kind of was in that era.
Heroes get remembered. Legends never die. And he was only 5'8". He's not a big dude.
You want me to pickle the beast? He had 1,280 goals across all competitions, which is still insane. 3 World Cups, top goal scorer 11 times. Like I said, when he had 56 or 58, that was still a record held today. 9 consecutive, 31 team trophies, 1 golden ball, 1 silver ball in the World Cup. His record with Santos for, I think it's 600 and... I'm looking for it. Give me a second. I think it's 646 goals was just broken by Lionel Messi from Barcelona. And that's what I was saying before, was if you're breaking a record, Pele probably had it.
In soccer, pretty much.
Soccer.
Yeah. No, I mean, he was amazing. What was one of the Man U defenders said in the 70 World Cup? How do you spell Pele? Easy. G-O-D.
Yeah, and they could all recognize that he almost was on this other level of, being amazing. Just to clarify, we are recording this when he's alive, because we know he does have health concerns, and we want to send our best out to him. Because for me, he's the greatest player ever. He brought soccer to America and kind of showed what it could be. So yeah.
Yeah, I didn't know who he was until I saw him peddling Crestfield wax paper on a Simpsons episode. But then I found out more, and he is amazing.
Thank you all.